Okay, so now that we've got everything in place in our game that we want to be able to use within our world, we have everything kind of active and everything working nicely the way it should, we want to be able to actually export this out and make it into a real game that we can play. So how do we do that? Well, what we want to do is go up to File here and go to Build Settings. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we have all the levels that we want in our Build Manager here. So we can see we don't have level 3 in our build settings. So at the moment that's the currently open level, so we could add it like this, or we can drag it in from here to add it to the scene. So let's just drag it in like that. Now we've got all our scenes. We'll actually just drag level select here up to be just below main menu. It doesn't actually make any sense. Not that it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't make any difference to the game, but we have our level select here, so we can just so it makes a kind of logical sense while we're looking at it. So the next thing we want to do is set some settings for how our game will kind of export out into the world. So we have all these different options here for if you want to use your game on different platforms. Now obviously it requires a bit of work to kind of customize them for different things. So if we were to make a touch game like on iOS, you need to incorporate kind of touch controls. If you wanted to make it for an Xbox or a PlayStation or anything, you need to make custom controls and stuff like that. And there's different kind of parameters that you need. But that would be further down the line. At the moment, what you really, when you're making your first kind of game like this, you want to be able to just export it to PCs and things like that. So before we hit this build button down here, which will actually make the whole game itself, what we want to do is go to player settings here. So if we click on that, then we get a couple of options over here on the right in the inspector. So we can put in a company name here. So that's whatever the name is of your company that you're selling your games as, or even just your own name, whatever you want to do. So we'll just put this down here as my company. We have a product name, so we'll just call this my first platformer game. And then here we have a space for a default icon and a default cursor. So the default icon is how it will display on your screen. So just for example, looking at my taskbar down here, so these little images here, these are the icons that are used for different kinds of programs, and we want to be able to set one for our game. So if we're going to set one of them, we're going to need to import an image into our file. So I'm just going to close out of our build settings here and go into our art folder, and then I'm going to go back to the resources I have included with this program, and I've got this little one for my first platformer game, so I'm going to drag this into here like this. So perfect, and then we're going to go back to our build settings and back to our player settings again, and then what we're going to do is just activate the player settings here. We want to drag our icon here into our position there like that, or of course we could go and click on where it says select down the bottom here, and we could select any kind of image that we want to use for our icon there. So we'll double click on that, and we've added that to the game. And then we've got a couple of options here for resolution and presentation, an icon and splash image. So just as an example, now that we added that icon at different sizes, this is how the icon will look in different places within your kind of windows or whatever. We've got splash image here, and splash image is kind of like a little image that will appear in a specific kind of box that shows up when you run the game. We'll demonstrate what that is in a minute, but just for now I'm just going to go in here, I'm just going to select this background image. It doesn't really matter too much, but we're just going to select it there so that we can see a bit later what that actually looks like. And then we've got other settings down here which don't really matter too much. You can kind of delve into them yourself, but they don't really need to be changed. But if you go back up to resolution and presentation here, so we can have, should it be full screen when it loads by default? We can leave it at that, that's fine. The resolution of the game, we'll have a bunch of different options for resolution, so we don't need to worry about that. And the reason we'll have a bunch of different options is because we have display resolution dialog here enabled. So if we disable that, then we won't be able to change any resolution or anything, but we're going to leave it active just for the moment. And we've color a couple of other different options here to mess around with and kind of see what suits yourself as well, but we're not going to worry too much about them. We only have these couple of basic ones here. So now we've set our kind of various different basic settings, we can actually build the game. Actually, just before we do this, so we set our default icon. We didn't set a default cursor because we're not doing anything specific in our game that really involves the cursor. So we don't need to change what our mouse pointer looks like. It's perfectly fine just looking as it is by default. So next thing we need to do is actually build our game. So we're going to choose our target platform. We just have Windows kind of available here. We've got a different architecture, so if you want it to be 64-bit or 32-bit, again, if you don't know what those terms are, it's best to kind of look up and kind of delve into understanding them. But we're just going to leave it as x86 here. That's the kind of default setting. And then we're going to hit this build button. And when we hit build, we'll get a folder open up that contains all our project files. So what I'm going to do if we were to save it in here, we're going to get a few different files made when we make our game. So we don't want to kind of get mixed around with what's currently in our folder. So we're going to make a new folder here that we're going to call builds. And this is where we're going to store any builds that we make over time. And we're just going to call this file name My First Platformer. And we'll call it version 1.0. So we'll save this. And we get this little bar here. So it'll take a couple of minutes to kind of compile the game. Depending on the size of the game and how much stuff is in it, it'll obviously take a little bit longer. But we haven't got too much going on in our game, so shouldn't take too long, but we'll just skip ahead to once it's complete. Okay, so once Unity finishes building our game, it'll open our window containing where our file is. So if we were to just go back up, we see we have where our all our assets are in our game, and we'll go back into our builds folder. And so it creates all these extra little bits here. And the important thing to remember is all these files need to be kept together to be able to run our game. So if you were to take this .exe file, which runs the game, and for example, if we were to put it up on this level here, it doesn't know where these other files are by any kind of other means. So we need to keep all of these together so that the game is actually able to run the game. So if we go ahead and double click on our first platformer.exe, we get this little window opening up here, and as you can see, we've got the little background wallpaper that we set within the player settings. That's where this gets assigned here. So this is kind of just a little way to show maybe a little bit of art from your game, or you could even use the name of your studio here or anything like that if you wanted to. But what this box is kind of some options for before we start the game. Now we could, if we disable this box altogether, then we're kind of just jumping straight into our game. But sometimes it's nice to give your players a few little extra options if they want to before they start up the game. So we've got graphics and input here. So if we go to input, what the players have the choice to do is reset any of the controls that you've set in your game. So if they want to reconfigure the game to control in any way that they particularly want, you can do that through this kind of options here. And if we go back to graphics, so we've got a screen resolution. I'm going to set this to be full size here. We have the option of making it windowed or not windowed. So we'll leave it not windowed so it takes up the whole screen. Graphics quality, we only have one setting. I've only got one monitor here. So let's hit play and we can start our game. You get this little Made with Unity splash screen, and that's kind of included by default. Unless you pay for premium Unity, it'll always be included with your games. So what we can do is go to new game now, and we can start playing our game for the first time. So we're free to run around and play in the world just the way we wanted to. We can complete this first level maybe, if this platform will come back to us. As you can see, the game, the very first time you get your very first game completed and running, it's a good feeling, and it's cool to see your own game running here on screen for the first time. So, I missed that guy altogether. And we get him. And there we go. We completed our first level. And that's basically all you need to make your own game. Everything else that you need to do is just applying the same logic and the same kind of ideas behind scripts to new things. Much like the way we did when we created that moving spinning saw in the first level, all that was applying the same kind of basic tools that we created to a new object in a new way. And when you boil them down, a lot of the time, any kind of danger in any game is just a basics of, it could literally just be a spike or anything like that, or something that's moving, and it's all kind of about just how you implement the same things. So as I said before, what you can do going forward is just kind of add different tile sets to use to create different worlds and different backgrounds and stuff like that, and all this is combining together with a unique kind of level design. And it's so much of making a game is about how you lay out your levels and everything like that. It's not just about the coding behind it, it's about your approach to designing the world. So all of that is going to be left up to you, but you now have the tools to go ahead and create your own very first platformer game. Thanks for watching this course here on Udemy, and if you've got any questions, make sure you ask them here and I will do my best to respond to them. And if you want to learn more about making games, you can follow me on youtube.com/gamesplusjames, where you can find more series created by me focusing on making other types of games.